Have you ever wanted more control and discipline in your dog's obedience, but you just don't quite know how to get it? Well, in this video, we're going to show you how to be more consistent by using our philosophy of one direction, one correction, and integrating discipline and control into your training. So what I want you to do right now, if this is interesting to you, is in the comments below, I want you to comment obedience and then type in what issues you're having or what you would like me to cover in future videos. And also let me know what you think of this video and if you have any other thoughts or ideas in this philosophy. All right, so let's jump into it. So for number one, consistency. Remember that dogs are very pattern driven. So what this means is if you walk into your house from your car every time the same way every time, so you get out of your car, you walk to the front door, you go inside, and your dog is moving with you in that pattern over and over again, if you change that pattern, expect that your dog is going to be following the same pattern. So you have to communicate that to your dog. If you let your dog out to use the bathroom the same way every morning, and then you change it up, and maybe you put your shoes on every morning, and then you open the crate, or then you start to move toward the door, and they're ready to go, and then you start to move toward the door, open their crate, but you forgot to put your shoes on, and so you sit down to put them on, and they pee on the floor. That was because you were being inconsistent, right? They're pattern driven. Something happens that engages in their mind, it's time to go use the bathroom, for instance, and they're ready to go, and so they have a certain expectation and then they're going to the bathroom, or they have a certain expectation and then they're expecting food, or they have a certain expectation and they're going into the house. Now, it's not that we can't change these things, especially as they get older, and they should be able to handle those changes, but we have to make sure we communicate those changes. So that's consistency on the good side, right? That's the patterns on the good side. Often what happens though is we establish patterns that we don't even know we're establishing a lot of times, and then when we realize that there's a pattern, it's something that frustrates us with the dog, right? And it could be all kinds of things. It could be letting the dog jump up on you when you come home. That's a pattern. Every time you come home, the dog jumps on you. If you don't do something to fix that quickly, that will establish itself as a pattern very quickly. If you're getting the dog food and you're getting ready to put it down for the dog and they jump up and knock it out of your hands, if you allow that jumping routinely, that becomes a pattern. So whatever you do consistently is what the dog is how they're going to behave. They're going to reflect that back to you, right? So make sure that the things that you're doing consistently are things that you want done, and when you see patterns developing, if they're not patterns that you know you're going to want, then change them frequently so that you don't have these ingrained patterns setting in the dog, especially early on. All right, also consistent communication. We're going to go into communication a lot more in detail in another video, but right now I want to just talk to you about the three forms of communication very briefly. So we have our verbals, what we say, we have our mannerisms, what we do, right? If I want my dog to jump up on there, I can point to it, right? Or I can move in that direction, so that's a mannerism. And then we have our lead direction. So if I have a lead on the dog or a leash and I want them to jump up there, I can direct up with the lead, right? Or if I want them to sit, for us, our lead direction for sit is to lift up slightly. As soon as they feel a little bit of tension lifting up, they sit down. So those are the three forms of communication. What happens a lot of times is that people will communicate one thing with one of those three and something different with the others, and the dogs become confused because it doesn't make sense to them. The primary form of communication that the dogs rely on from us is our mannerisms. Right? So if I just do that with a dog next to me that's been handled by me for a while, they know to jump up because my mannerism told them to do so. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't need a lead. I just pointed and moved towards it, and they knew I wanted them to jump up on it. That's the primary form of communication they rely on. Humans rely on one of the other two. If they have a lead on, they're typically relying on that. You'll see there's a tight lead and they're just kind of moving the dog where they want him to go, right? If you have a tight lead, that means your other two forms of communication have zero effect on the dog or very little, right? And so you want to get away from that. You want to have a loose lead, be able to use your verbals and your gestures and get the dog to obey, and then your lead is just there to offer some guidance and if necessary to give a correction. And then make sure you're consistent in your corrections, speaking of those. So if you are telling your dog to do something, they don't do it, maybe you fuss at them, right? Some people use some people use no. We use phooey that, right? So if my dog does something that I don't like and I say phooey that, and I don't get up and actually go correct them, if I develop a habit of that, they will stop respecting my command and my verbal correction. If I consistently get up and go correct, then if they're at a distance and I need to correct them and say, "Phooey that, go back to your place," they will respect that at a distance because I've established that it means something by consistently going and correcting, not sitting on the couch watching TV and going, "Oh man, I don't want to get up and go correct my dog." Make sure, especially in the early stages, you get up, you consistently correct when it's needed. Now we're going to talk about praise in just a second here, but I want my dogs to stop barking first. All right, so let's talk about using the prong collar. Our pillar number 2 that we're delving a little more in depth into today is one direction, one correction. Okay, so we use a prong collar. I really like the prong collar. I strongly recommend it for 99% of dogs and handlers because it allows you to give the gentlest, lightest lead direction all the way up to a severe correction and everything in between instantly, just based on what you feel is needed at that moment, right? So if your dog is aggressively lunging out trying to hurt another person or a dog, you can correct very strongly and tell them, "No, don't do that." Or you can just go, "Hey, pay attention to me, stop looking at that squirrel," right? And everything in between. So I really like the prong collar. It's not some vicious thing that hurts the dogs. We are not looking for a yelp. In fact, what I tell my clients all the time is we are using the lightest correction necessary to achieve the desired result. So if my dog is supposed to sit and I tell them sit and they don't sit, I give them a little bump, "Phooey that, sit." Whatever is needed to get them to sit. Now some dogs are resistant, need a harder correction. The bigger, stronger dogs typically require a little bit harder correction. A smaller, lighter dog or a dog that's just sensitive to the lead would require a very light correction. We're not looking for a yip. All we want them to do is sit when we tell them to sit, lay when we tell them to lay, wait when we tell them to wait. That's it. So don't overuse the prong, but when you use it, you give your direction one time. Remember the pattern-driven aspect that we just talked about. You give the direction one time, and then you expect obedience immediately. Now that doesn't mean instantly robotically, but it means that the dog needs to obey reasonably fast. And then if they obey, here's the biggest thing that most people fail at. When your dog obeys your command, praise them. Now that doesn't mean freak out and yell and scream and go into high-pitched crazy voice. All it means is good sit, right? But what happens a lot of times is people go sit. They're usually frustrated or upset that their dog, usually doesn't sit or whatever their issue is, and they go sit, "Phooey it, sit," and they pop the dog sits, and then they go about whatever they're doing, right? That you're ruining the opportunity to praise your dog. Your dog wants to do what you want them to do. They want to please you 99% of the time. So when they obey the command, praise them. For us, we say good, and then we repeat the command. So if I told my dog to sit, when they sit, I say good sit. When I tell them to lay down, which for us is to plutz, I say plutz. They lay down, I say good plutz. So remember to praise your dog. Now, here's the thing. A lot of times, people feel the need to say something, especially when they're under stress. They're working an obstacle or they're moving through a store or something like that, right? And they'll just keep repeating the same command over and over and over again. That typically is going to develop a verbal or communication with the dog that you don't want, okay? So what I encourage people to do is when they give the command to their dog, so let's say they tell their dog to climb a ladder, right? And so the dog is climbing the ladder. Don't keep saying, "Climb the ladder, climb the ladder." They're already climbing the ladder. What you can say is, "Good, climb the ladder. Good climb, good climb, good job, good climb." And then if they start to stall a little, you say, "Climb the ladder. Good climb, good climb." And then you would praise as they're doing what you want. So that integrates the praise with the command, and it keeps the philosophy of one direction. The command is your direction, one direction, and then expecting the obedience. And then if you're saying, "Good, climb the ladder," this is assuming that you've worked with the dog, they already know the command. Then, and they start to stall on you, one little bump, "Phooey that, climb the ladder," and then they start to climb again, and then we move on from there. All right, so if you've liked this video so far, please remember to click the like below, click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you click on the little bell so that you can get notifications of our weekly training videos that will be coming out. And if you really like the video, please share this with your friends or somebody that you think would benefit from it. So let's talk about the last one, discipline and control. Okay. You can't be lazy if you want an obedient dog. Now that doesn't mean that you have to be hyper crazy all the time or anything like that. It just means that when you give the dog direction, you must require that they be obedient to that direction. So if you're sitting, watching TV, relaxing, and you say something to your dog and they don't obey, you cannot ignore it. You can't just pretend it didn't happen. Hey, you two, chill. Dog's playing behind me here. You have to get up and correct. One direction, one correction. You gave the direction, they must obey. Do not let them get away with not obeying. Just like these two. Blipe, leave it. Good, leave it. So when you give your direction, if the dog doesn't obey, you have to get up and go correct. So if you are wanting to relax and not wanting to do anything at that moment, then don't give the direction to the dog, because once you give it, it must be done. If you're working an exercise and you tell the dog to sit and they don't sit, you can't just go on and continue the exercise. You have to require the sit before you move on. So keep that in mind, discipline and control. Here's the other aspect of it. Don't get angry and frustrated. So here's what happens a lot of times. Somebody's trying to teach their dog something new, like to jump up on something. And so they're like, hup, and the dog's like, no, don't want to. And they're like, fooey that hup, and they work through it. The dog finally gets up there, and by the time they get the dog up on the stool, they're tired, they're frustrated, they're angry, and they're just like, rah. And that's kind of their response to the dog for getting up on the stool. That is not a good response. As soon as the dog obeys, no matter what you had to do to get them there, as soon as they obey, good hup, attaboy, attagirl, good hup, right? So throwing in the attaboy, good boy, good girl, that's fine. Just remember to repeat your commands. So if the command was hup, to jump up, then it's good hup, right? You cannot be frustrated, angry with the dog. If you have to correct, you correct. Once they obey, the correction is in the past, it's over, we don't care about it anymore. As far as I'm concerned, it never happened. Good job, you did what you're supposed to. If you do that with your dogs, you will see their confidence go up, you will see their obedience increase, and you will see your control in almost every situation go up. So if you like this content and you want more like it, make sure you check us out over at Facebook. Our Facebook handles are @FortressK9Dogs for our trained dogs. You can see lots of our cool videos and pictures over there. That's also where you can connect with us if you want to purchase one of our dogs. And we are at K9 Academy online on the dog training side. So that's a great place to check us out on Facebook. On Instagram, we are at Fortress K9 and at K9 Academy online. Those are our two Instagram channels that we have. You can also check us out for our online training courses at K9academyonline.com and over at FortressK9.com. In order to see the dogs that we have available for sale, check out our purchasing process and start moving forward in that direction if you are looking for a protection dog. I hope this has been beneficial for you, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.